remember one time him saying to me, Catherine, I need your advice. I need your advice. Now, Tom asking me for advice, but that's the way he approached people.
He was very humble. This gentleman that always seemed to be kind and gentle and always had, a few minutes of your time to ask you how your day was.
I'll certainly never forget the first few conversations I had with Tom Symons. He expressed concern for the center and the heritage programming, and he didn't waste any time. He got right down to it and made sure that I knew how important that side of things was.
He was a great guy, to say the least. Tom and I really struck off a very instant relationship and friendship, which really stayed through, the entire time that I've known Tom.
Tom commanded a tremendous amount of respect. I say commanded, he had earned a tremendous amount of respect by people around the board table.
When Tom spoke about something as passionately as he did, people sat up and took notice.
Tom was a builder of tradition, and you never realized you were in the center of tradition building until it happened.
Tom Symons was born in Toronto in 1929. He went to school at U of T and later Oxford. He later returned to U of T as a professor. He was a professor there of ancient history and of Canadian history. He married Christine and they had 3 kids, Mary, Ryerson, and Jeffrey. Later on, Tom founded Trent University.
The founder of Trent is nothing to be snuffed at. It was a major, architecturally speaking, strong institution in Canada.
He founded Canada's first program in Indigenous Studies, and the first, or one of the first, in Canadian Studies, and the Journal of Canadian Studies. Those things really inspired a lot of other post-secondary institutions in Canada to follow suit. He was chairman of the Ontario Human Rights Council for a time in the late 70s and led a number of strong initiatives there, not the least of which was improving civil rights for the LGBT community. Historic
Sites and Monuments Board was very important to Tom, and they designated many buildings on PEI, like Shaw's Hotel and Dalvey and Province House and the Confederation Centre, of course. He loved PEI.
He loved the scenery. He loved the quiet atmosphere compared to Ontario.
He came here every summer.
Well, Tom started coming to Shaw's before I was even born. I believe that started in 1946 when he first came.
He was hitchhiking around Atlantic Canada.
He ended up at the Hunter River train station.
Tom didn't have a place to sleep.
And my dad took him to the hotel, provided him a bed for a couple of nights, and as he said, fed me a good roast beef dinner, and it was a love affair ever since.
For almost 75 years, he came to Shaw's.
I used to ask him, well, how many years do you think that you missed? And he said, well, it's irrelevant. In my heart, I've been here for 75 years. He fell in love with one of the cottages because of the view overlooking Brackley Bay. I picked him up at the airport, took him out to the hotel here and helped him into his cottage. I turned and looked to see how he was making out, and it was just a beeline across the living room to the front porch. I said, how are you doing? He said, well, I'm in heaven now.
He just loved it.
We've had grand parties at Shaw's. They're just family to him.
Even though they would call him Professor Symons, a lot of times he would just turn around and say, call me Tom.
And he'd drive around in the later years in that little tractor. And he was king of the castle out there, king of the castle.
First day I joined the board back in 2013, I think it was, Tom Symons was on my right-hand side, and strangely enough, John Crosby was on the left-hand side. So I had a very unique introduction to the board at the Confederation Centre.
Well, he had a tremendous amount of friends here.
Tom was somebody that knew everybody.
Whether they were colleagues from the Confederation Centre,
royalty,
academic people,
prime ministers,
my staff,
presidents, and even the Pope.
You see him come back and ask him, where were you today? Said, I had an audience with the Premier. Then they would always invite him in for a couple hours to chat about the state of the nation, I guess, in PEI.
Discuss the situation in the province and in the country, and he always wanted to be involved in that. He was always concerned about it.
He had to meet with the Queen or talk to a housekeeper here at the hotel on an equal basis.
Certainly we were very unlikely friends. He was highly academic and I was just a farm boy from the country.
They just were like that.
Tom and I were just like that. As you know, Chrissy, we spent a lot of time together that I often wondered whether you appreciated or not.
Frank and Tom would drink, I think it was scotch,
Tom would always have a little touch of famous grouse.
and smoke cigars.
I would be with him and we'd be, whether it be at my place or on the deck at Shaw's or here at Confederation Centre, we'd always be chatting and we'd be late getting Tom home to bed.
And Christine, it would annoy Christine.
I have to say, Chrissy, that of all those times, I don't know whether you really forgave me, but it was visible to me that you understood that just the two boys were out playing around.
You know, over the time you developed quite a fond relationship, not only with the Shaws, but a lot of people on Prince Edward Island and thankfully the Confederation Centre as well.
Tom Symons joined the board of directors here at the center in 1986, and in 2010 later became a governor of the board.
He would listen very patiently and very quietly to hear everybody else's point of view before he would intercede and offer his point of view. It was usually so well thought out that Tom had a knack of being able to carry the day. He was a very effective communicator.
Tom was always extremely engaged, an extremely active board member, contributing a lot, genuinely interested in all the conversations. And something I noticed is how inclusive and kind he was to newcomers. He really embraced them and engaged them, always sharing stories about the history of certainly the Symons Medal, but more broadly the history of this place and its role in celebrating Canada.
The Symons Lecture is just a wonderful addition to our community.
The Symons Medal Lecture began in 2004. Tom Symons led the founding of this.
Tom had a thought about the center that the center was a three-legged stool.
Knowing that our gallery is first class and our theater is world class.
He always felt that the heritage leg wasn't getting the attention that it deserved and that it should have got.
The Symons Medal is meant to grow your heritage programming and make sure that that's a solid part of your identity.
We had a board member of the day from Ontario, from Toronto, George Kitching, and he came to the board quietly without Tom's knowledge to say, would the board give consideration to us naming it after Tom Symons? And of course, very little discussion, we jumped on that pretty quickly. The Symons Lecture name then became synonymous with that whole idea of heritage.
It is awarded to a Canadian who's made a significant contribution to life in Canada. It's important that over the years, the Symons Committee recognizes people from different walks of life, Canadians who've made contributions in different ways. Each year, the medalist is invited to give a lecture here in the Main Stage Theatre at Confederation Centre of the Arts on the current state of Canadian Confederation and how it's evolving. And from their perspective, from their field of expertise, they comment on how Canada is doing.
Not only in terms of the past, but also in terms of the future of Confederation in this country.
Well, I think it's kind of stood for a lot of what Tom was interested in, what his life goals and studies and his research and work sort of represented. This is the monument to the founding fathers of Confederation, which was one of the primary interests of Tom and his work through his life.
I called him the dean of the board. He was very influential around the board. And you know, that's why the Symons Lecture, I mean, he knew all these people. They were all friends of his in one way or another to influence to come down here for the Symons Lecture.
A few of the Symons medalists have included Jean Charest, Mary Simon, the author Antonin Maillet. Most recently, we've had Bob Rae, the current ambassador to the UN for Canada, Senator Murray Sinclair, who of course co-chaired the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Before him was Margaret Macmillan, a great historian. We've had David Suzuki and the actor Paul Gross. There's been a wonderful array of medalists and speakers who've been able to talk about this country from the point of view of artists, of politicians, of academics, and it's just been an incredible series.
We have a unique opportunity here at the Centre to ensure the legacy of Tom lives on through the Symons Medal and Lecture, and I'm sure that Tom, as well as his family, be quite proud of his legacy in that regard, and I know the Confederation Centre is delighted to be a part of it.
And each year that series is growing in national stature and following as well, so it's serving the purpose that it was intended for.
The Symons Medal Lecture has certainly grown in terms of its reach. One of the small silver linings of the way we've had to do things this year was that we did the Symons Medal with the Honourable Bob Rae on video. We actually had over 10,000 views of that lecture. So we're excited to continue in that vein along with a live presentation and continue to see this event grow.
It's important to make sure that the country understands its origin, what the perspectives are from different people with respect to Confederation. I think that it's important, and I think Tom would say too, that it's important to make sure everybody knows all the stories, good or bad, and also to highlight the importance on moving ahead, and what a great country we live in, for that matter.
There was a great write-up in the Toronto Star yesterday, and it certainly painted him as a Canadian icon.
He was a great friend of Shaw's, a great friend of the family. It just was something that became common practice, his visits here to PI.
We've lost a great man, we lost a great friend, I've lost a great mentor personally. I think the country and the world has lost an individual who really strive to foster understanding.
We'll certainly continue the Symons Medal in Tom's honor, and we're excited to establish an interpretive center on Canadian heritage. We're going to find a permanent way to tell the many stories of Canada's history from the colonial and Indigenous perspectives, and really respect that tradition of what this place is here for, what it's here to celebrate. So we have a lot to give thanks for Tom.
He wasn't at all pushy. He was a dear, sweet man. A true historian, really. Takes one to know one.
He was just very generous with his own time and with his experience, so I'll always be grateful for that.
We lost a great friend. We really lost a great friend. It's sad to see him go.
I always remember Tom and Frank Lewis and George Kitching and a few would always gather on the chairs at the riverbank, enjoy a scotch as the sun set down. And we had a board member, her name was Charlene Belsher. You guys may have heard Gordon Belsher, and Gordon's wife Charlene was a board member. He would always ask her to sing a song on our riverbank with the sun setting. And the song was called Caledonia. And Gordon would play his guitar and Charlene would sing. And that was a tradition for many, many years. I still remember that. Yeah.
I just want to conclude by saying to my buddy and to all the Symons family, I will miss him greatly until the day I die. I will not forget you, buddy.
Let me tell you that I love you, that I think about you all the time. Caledonia, you're calling me, now I'm going home. But if I should become a stranger, oh, it would make me more than sad. Caledonia's been everything I've ever had. I have moved and I've kept on moving, proved the points that needed proving, lost the friends that needed losing, found others on the way. Oh, I have tried and I've kept on trying, stolen dreams dreams, yes, there's no denying. I have traveled far at times with conscience flying somewhere in the wind. Let me tell you that I love you, that I think about you all the time. Caledonia, you're calling me, now I'm going home. But if I should become a stranger, oh, it would make me more than sad. Caledonia's been everything I've ever had. Now I'm sitting here before the fire, the empty room, a forest choir. The flames have cooled, won't get any